Okay, everyone, I'd like to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Y River Upper School Virtual Speaker Series, especially if this is your first time here. And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Katie Lillard, and I'm the Director of Admissions. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions during the speaker series. You can type a question in the chat, and I will do my best to make sure it gets answered. The speaker series provides education and support to parents of middle and high school students. Experts in their fields, our speakers offer guidance and help to parents raising teens in a stressful era. Just want to pause to let someone else in. Okay. And for anyone who doesn't know about our school, Y River Upper School is an independent nonprofit high school that changes lives of students who learn differently due to dyslexia, ADHD, executive function needs, anxiety, high functioning, autism, and more. Our program provides a well-rounded, rigorous, individualized curriculum that recognizes and develops each student's strengths. Our inclusive and uniquely supportive environment enables students to thrive and grow socially and academically. If you're interested in attending future speaker series events, please join our meetup group, follow us on social media, or check out the events tab of our website. Next month, we are hosting a mother and daughter named Karen and Sage Dolan, who appeared in Disney Plus's docuseries Growing Up. And if you haven't seen it, please check it out. This documentary explores complexities of adolescence through 10 unique stories. Sage's story is one of those stories. And now 22 years old, Sage is a transgender female. So she and her mother, Karen, will lead an open format question and answer dialogue between themselves and any attendees of the meeting. And the topic will surround transgender teens. But tonight we have an amazing speaker who we've had the pleasure of working with at school. Beth Anne has come and worked with our students and with our faculty and staff, and she has a wealth of experience and knowledge to share. Beth Anne Dorman Langrell is a seasoned executive with demonstrated experience in person-first leadership, nonprofit standards of excellence, organizational sustainability and agility, and mental health administration. She's also a highly sought after trainer, certified to train audiences in topics related to mental health and wellness, sexual assault, community resilience, and leadership skills. Beth Anne's current role as president and CEO of For All Seasons, which is a behavioral health agency and rape crisis center in Easton, that is a critical lifeline for over 200,000 rural Marylanders. As the chief executive since 2014, Beth Anne has been instrumental in ensuring the For All Seasons sustainability, including growing the agency's operating budget from $1.4 million annually to $9.3 million in just 9 years. And during her tenure, she also established For All Seasons as one of the region's largest employers, growing from 24 to nearly 100 employees. Tonight, we will consider how to support and encourage young people in creating their own journey towards mental wellness and living their best life. Vulnerable and honest connections between parent and caregivers and strong relationships with those who support them help youth embrace their strengths and lead them into a stronger sense of self for lifelong success and fulfillment. Beth Anne Dorman Langrell will guide you in conversation tonight, highlighting the power of connection to help youth and families develop resilience.
You're able to
and
listen.
Truly thrive. So welcome, Beth.
Able to
Thank
listen.
you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me. If all of you that are online are able to turn your cameras on, I would love it. I love presenting to faces instead of black boxes, so I will put that out before I get started. I have so much, and your hair looks fine. It looks great. Don't worry about it. I am so excited to be here with you tonight, and I appreciate the introduction, and there are a number of things that sit on my resume, but I really come to you tonight as a mom, as a parent, as someone who happens to have expertise in the mental health field, but as someone who tries to show up and get it right, but doesn't always get it right. And so I think, as I think about the students at Wye River and those folks may be joining the Wye River family, it's an amazing school, and we have the privilege as the largest behavioral health and rape crisis center to work side by side everyone at the school. And I want to just share with you a little bit about the agency that I run, so you just have some context. We provide mental health services, psychiatry, victim services, outreach, and we have a center for learning, which is how I'm here with you this evening, because we believe that it's our job to help bring education to the community. We have 7 offices across the 5 counties of the Midshore. So there's offices in Talbot, Dorchester, Caroline, Queen Anne's, and Kent County. And we're really excited to also be growing our programs in the schools and our connections. And so tonight we are here to talk about connection, and we're here to talk about how we can help our children be more connected and find their path and their journey to mental wellness. And so I just wanted to start with a really basic introduction of let's figure out what connection is. It's that relationship in which a person, thing, or idea is linked or associated with something else. Connections between social attitudes and productivity is also how you can think about connection. And to begin, I would really love for you all to introduce yourselves to me and tell me why you're here, because that's really important to me, is to have an understanding of what's your so what of joining our program tonight. So I'm just going to call out whose name is listed. I don't know your name. It's listed as iPhone. So whoever's iPhone, that would be great if you could just give a little bit of information and share who you are.
I'm not sure if that's me because
I think
I'm
it is.
using an
Yeah, no,
iPhone.
it's you.
Okay.
It's you.
I don't know why I'm not showing up there. Yeah, my name is Evelina, and I thought, the subject because I have a daughter who is a transgender and who is pretty much sedentary and just staying at home. And I just I've been trying to find support, and I've been trying to look for ways to help her get out of this. And so I thought maybe you have something that I could help me and her.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability.
Sure.
Tranisha, did I say it properly?
Yes, I'm riding in the car. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So my son actually just graduated from White River this past summer. So I'm just, he's getting older now. So just trying to figure out better ways to communicate with him on his level. That's why I decided to attend tonight.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Curion. I have a son that's a freshman at Wye River this year. And I just, anything for parenting skills that I can get, I love to get and just to educate myself some more.
Great. Thanks for being here. And Kara?
Hi, my name is Kara Luthart. I have 3 neurodiverse children. My son, who is in 8th grade this year, will be applying to Wye River. And so I got the email, and because I'm, raising 3 very different personalities, I just thought this would just, like the last person said, just another tool in my pocket, maybe to kind of make sure that I'm, staying connected and giving them what they need, and maybe little tricks up my sleeve. So that's my story.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And, it's all, I always love when I have a small group to present to, and especially when we have a commonality of being moms. So to just give you a little bit about my mom background. I am the mom of 4 boys. 2 are my stepchildren and 2 are my biological children. And you notice that it was Beth Anne Langrell on the advertisement and Beth Anne Dorman Langrell because I just got married 3 weeks ago to my husband. And so we're in the middle of merging a family. And so I totally hear you, Kara, when you talk about raising different personality children. So in our household, we have a 17-year-old, 2 13-year-olds, and an 11-year-old. And so, and they all come with different challenges. And so we are the parents of a child with some pretty severe mental health issues. And we are also the parents of a child who is in recovery at the age of 17. And so for us, we understand that sometimes it looks a little bit different. And that's really why I was excited about tonight's program, because I think at the very outset of all of this, I said to you, like, I'm here to try to get it right, but I don't always get it right. And so I'm so appreciative that everyone's here tonight to try to gain something. And I hope that all of you take something away and just know that I too love gaining. So if you feel so inclined to unmute, please know that this is not like a talk at you. This for me is more about, let's have a conversation. I think that's really what it's all about. One of the things that we know about children, and we know, and you could apply this to children, you could apply this to adults, is that when we have positive connection, that is when we see thriving environments. And so nourishing emotional and physical well-being, creating a safe space, it really pushes our happy meter. It pushes the happy meter of our children, and that increases our quality of life, and it cultivates resiliency and lowers anxiety and increases self-esteem. And as I read through that list, every time that I provide this information to the community, I always think like, wow, that would be the ultimate. If we could hit all of those, bullet points, we would be in a really great space. But the reality is that many times we fall short, our children fall short, or our families are struggling to even hit 1 or 2 of those at the same time when things are difficult. And so what's really also important is to talk about what happens when there is a lack of connection. That void of depth, being able to sort of dig in, one of the things that we started this program off with was vulnerability of you all sharing with me why you're here, me sharing back with you why this is so important to me, feeling like nobody gets it. I think there's so many times that our children and the children in the community go through feeling like I'm the only one, or maybe we as parents walk through thinking nobody gets this situation. Remaining at a surface level because it's safe. It is a lot safer to keep things bottled up in a box and not share. It's a lot safer to pretend like everything is going well. In my world, I call it the I'm fine conversation, because I think so many times we get into a cycle as parents, as caregivers, as working people, when people say, how are you doing? And it's much easier some days to just say, I'm fine, and keep going on. And I always say to our community, we have a great opportunity to connect with people by simply sticking around for that answer and really hearing how people are doing. Because I imagine that you, like me, sometimes say to folks like, hey, how are you? But we're so busy taking our kid to the next event or jumping into the next meeting or getting dinner on the table or trying to figure out how we're going to respond to what just happened with one of our kids, that sometimes we really don't stick in and we stay on the surface with people. But if we checked in with folks, we might get a totally different answer. The things that trigger isolation is also a lack of connection. When we think about reasons that people are not engaging, or maybe the reason that someone is staying at the surface is because some of the lack of connection may have someone be in a situation where they're going to pull back because they don't feel safe enough to be able to dive in. And all of these continue to move in a direction of, when we talk about mental health and mental wellness, depression and anxiety are indicative of lack of connection. And so one of the things that we do know is that COVID and post-COVID changed us. Kids are different, parents are different, and I just always say everything is different. And I think we got to a point where we stopped talking about COVID because people were sick about talking. They were sick of talking about COVID. But the thing that's really important, and I think is a message that if you take nothing with you tonight, which I hope you take more, but if you take nothing with you, knowing that we are in the middle of a mental health crisis that has not even yet hit a peak, and our children are at the heart of that crisis. The pandemic has worsened children's mental health and exacerbated existing mental health issues among children. It caused disruptions in routines, and social isolation for children began to rise. And a number of studies across the board have shown that children's mental health needs following social isolation have spiked during the pandemic. And so as I was getting ready for this presentation, I came across something, and I'm typically not like someone who reads paragraphs, but I thought this was really important information for us to talk through tonight. This is from the Kaiser Family Foundation. Their analysis found that adolescents experience anxiety and or depression has increased by 1/3 from 2016 to 2021, with rates of anxiety or depression being more pronounced among adolescent females and with in the white population. A separate survey of high school students in 2021 found that the LGBT population were more likely to report feelings of sadness and hopelessness than their heterosexual peers. And in the past, adolescents have experienced worsened emotional health, increased stress, a lack of peer connection, along with the increasing rate of drug overdoses, self-harm, and eating disorders. Now, I don't know about all of you, but I think for me as a parent, and especially for me as a mental health professional, that paragraph really sort of sums up the pieces that we know, and it touches everybody. So my philosophy in all of the mental health work that I do is that if we all stood in a room of 100 people at a cocktail party and we read that paragraph, every single person in that room, if asked the question, does this affect you or your family, will raise their hand. It's not something we always talk about. It's not something that we're always allowing ourselves to be in a part of a conversation with. But one of the things that we know is that all of our children are suffering differently. We also know that 10 years ago, when I first came to the agency and started this work, my background is higher education administration, and I was a clinician at higher education institutions for 15 years before moving into this job. What I know is for a long time, the profession of mental health talked about diagnosis. And what I talk about now are mental health symptoms, because what we've come to know is that you don't necessarily have to have a mental health diagnosis in order to identify with a symptom. So show of hands from all of you, how many of you felt a mental health symptom? Loneliness, depression, anxiety, grief, stress during the pandemic? Because I think it's all of us at one point or another. So if we can identify as parents, with or without a diagnosis, that these things affected us, our emotions were moving, our way of life looked different, then we know, and these statistics that I just read to you, and this is just one of many from the Kaiser Family Foundation, we know that our children suffered differently and continue to suffer. And one of the things, do you all remember a couple of years ago when the sexual assault movement came through with the hashtag #MeToo movement, and it's still present today? So I have identified in this last year what I call the hashtag, you too? And it's for me, and it's for parents, and it's for most people that I talk with. Because what I think we also have fallen into post-COVID and throughout COVID is what I call the hallmark, the Facebook, and the reality. So the hallmark is that everything is picture perfect, and there's cocoa by the fireplace, and there's cookies, and every story ends up really lovely, and you can turn it on. You don't have to listen to all of it. You know it's just all going to go really well. And that's fine. And that's not the world that I live in, but I love to get lost in that world. And then I think what's happened through the pandemic and what our children have seen is the Facebook. They've seen how social media shows up. They've seen how we glorify the heroes in the movies. They've seen how the celebrities have moved. They see all of the really good things, because it's super easy to put all our great stuff on Facebook. Because I'm not sure about how your Facebook page looks, but I don't see people's bad times showing up on Facebook. And if that's one of the ways that our children are connecting, then it is an unrealistic expectation that our children start to think of how life is supposed to look. Because then there is the reality that I call the, you too? And that's the reality where all of us on this call right now could sit down and say, I had a really bad day. Here's what happened in my family today. Here's how my child is struggling. And the more that we sit and the more that we talk with people, and the more that we stay and the more we check in, the more we realize that every single one of us has something that our children are struggling with, or that we ourselves are struggling to put together a solution for. And so the important thing that I think when we think about the Facebook, the reality, is that hashtag, you too, is that knowing it's okay to talk about mental health needs within our children. It's okay to display for your child, and it's okay to model for your child that we don't have to pretend these conversations can't happen. You know, it used to be the hushed conversation that nobody wanted to have. But that reality is, if all of us could raise our hands and say we were having some effect through a mental health symptom in COVID, then the reality is all of our children could say that same thing. And for a long time, it was the conversation, you know, you knew that grandma wasn't acting right, or you knew that, you know, Aunt Sally wasn't doing well, or Uncle John had something going on, but we didn't talk about the why behind it. And so now we're in a culture where kids are really talking about it. And we as parents need to be able to create those safe spaces so that our children can feel comfortable and say, here's how I'm feeling. And so part of what we need to do is we need to talk about how we are preparing the child and not the journey. So knowing your child, you know, one of the things that we know is that we know our kids best. And so I can sit here as a mental health professional and I can give you 1,500 ways that you could work with your child. But, you know, Leslie, you might say to me, that's not going to work for my kid, because here's the 3 reasons why. And so one of the things that we know is that as we're preparing our children for a journey, we don't get to lay out the roadmap for them. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to fall. We're going to make mistakes and we're going to fall. But the gut of leaning into knowing your child best is one of the number one things that our children need as we are preparing them for this journey. Knowing the time in and our individualized approach to positive time with our child, whether it's to repair relationships if something's not going right. It may be that you have a stronger relationship with one child than your partner, your spouse. Maybe it's somebody else in the family. It's okay to yield and say, I'm going to dig into some positive time, even in those challenging moments. And it's also okay in those time and moments to say, I'm not what this child needs right now. You know, one of the things I can tell you is I'm extremely fortunate to have a great co-parenting relationship with my ex-husband. There are moments where even now, and even when we were married, he doesn't do feelings well. And so he would say, this is your conversation to have. And so my job became bringing him into that conversation. But I didn't always feel the need to have to be the top at the baseball field. And he didn't always feel the need to be the top in the feelings conversation. So it's okay to share the time in as long as it's the positive experience. It's also okay as you're thinking about time in with your kids to not do it right and to get it wrong. We have to give ourselves permission to get it wrong, because no matter how many books you read, and no matter how many things you watch, no matter how many people you listen to, you might try something that I share with you tonight and you might fail miserably. And that's okay, because it's not an exact science. And we have to lean into what we know about our children and give in that positive time for us to be able to figure out what's going to work. The other thing is about engagement and understanding. So none of our children are the same. You know, Kara, you identified you're raising 3 very different children with 3 very different personalities. You know, I remember when I was pregnant for my second child and somebody said to me, my only advice to you is don't make your second child play the sport that your first child played because it's convenient for your time. And it's one of those moments of advice I always think about, because it's the reminder for me that just because it works for my 13-year-old doesn't mean it's going to work for my 11-year-old. And at times, it's my job as a parent to have to change the strategy. But we do as parents sometimes feel like, well, why can't you just get it the way that I'm talking about it? And so sometimes it's really like being a coach. You have to go back and think about the strategy and redistribute the plays of the game so that children are able to walk down a journey that's not ours. Because sometimes we want to say to our kids, let me tell you why that's not going to work, rather than saying, help me understand why you think that's the best choice. And the phrase help me understand is something that I encourage you to use with your children. It's something that comes from the work of Brene Brown, and I'm super fortunate to be a Dare to Lead facilitator through Brene Brown. And it is one of those, isn't she awesome? I was trained by her in Texas. She's so amazing and wonderful.
We kind of have a book club at work, and one of my coworkers had us read Dare to Lead, and yes. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, it was great. I learned a lot about myself, like things yes, I was like,
you
that
absolutely
has a name. My husband was like, great, it has a name now. We can
right. That's so true. So for those of you who might not be familiar with Brene Brown, she is an expert in shame and an expert in courageous leadership. And so if you haven't picked up one of her books, I would encourage you to do that. And one of Brene's ways that she talks about connection with children and helping to open up dialogue is the phrasing that we use. So instead of saying, why did you do that? Using a term, help me understand. And I use this both in my professional world and in my personal life, of help me understand the choice that you made, or help me understand why you think that's the best path. It opens up a dialogue, and it allows our children to be able to respond without feeling judged. So the help me understand is really about laying a foundation for a conversation versus us saying, well, this is how you should do it. And that is one thing that I think our children thrive in, is being able to feel like what they are doing is as important as the advice that we have to give them. Motivation through positive attention is also really important. And so we want to reinforce the good behavior. So it's super important for us to be able to move through in appropriate expectations and allowing children to work independently. And so positive attention and helping to say, here's the tools that you need, go try. And I think sometimes as parents, we know what it's like. And, you know, you ever have one of those situations where you know, like, it's going to be a train wreck if they walk this direction, but sometimes it's okay. And we need to be able to let our children walk that path versus putting the path in front of them. And then motivation through experience. So when parents, when should we step forward? When should we not step forward? You know, I remember saying to my 13-year-old stepson this morning, this is going to be hard. And I'm sorry that you're going through this. And I wish that I could share with you all of the experiences where you're going to come out on the other side of whatever's happening. And sometimes that will be helpful. And sometimes it's okay just to say, I'm sorry, you're having a really difficult time. And so that balance of sharing the experience, but also letting our children know that it's okay, that it's tough in that moment. Motivation through rewards. One of the things I say all the time when I work with kids and when I work with parents is reward the work, not the end result. And so celebrate your child's work as they're making an achievement. So rather than celebrating the first place trophy at the end of the baseball season, celebrate the practices, celebrate the hit at practice, celebrate the moments where the child is showing up to a practice even when they've had a really long week. And if we can help our children understand that the motivation and the celebration happens all throughout whatever the project is, whether it's a really big, you know, if it's a 100 that they received on a test, really lean into how that child got to that grade. And so that they're seeing the reward and being motivated along the way. Problem solving and moving beyond behavior management with children really is about a developmental approach where we learn to solve problems together. So not always giving the solution, but saying, let's work through this together. Here's what I think, but what do you think? And then sometimes you may start with, what do you think before I tell you what I think? So that children are starting to learn skills. Pausing for empathy and self-reflection, I think, is so incredibly invaluable. Teaching and practicing that language of both emotion and validation and love. So being able to really pause and do some self-reflection through whether it's an achievement, whether it's a difficult time, helping the child be able to sort of stay in the moment and holding a space for the times when it's difficult and celebrating when it's working well. And then looking at some of the roads ahead and finding the right balance of accommodation and skill building. So sometimes you're going to have the situation be that we provide the solution, or we say this is what has to happen. But also being able to help children build skills are really important, because ultimately that's what we want. We want our children to be able to learn as they are going, so that when we are seeing our child move through different scenarios, we can help build skills. So rather than saying, you need to apologize to these 3 people if something happened in school, it's the conversation of, who do you think you might need to follow up with? And what do you think that might look like? And so really being able to sort of move in that accommodation and intervention end of things. And here's what I'll tell you. I think all of these strategies are just what they are. And one of the things that we know is that parenting is tough and not one size fits all. And everything that we try isn't always going to work. And so one of the things that I do know so well about what happens in our worlds is that sometimes we need to be able to just sort of quantify what we're doing as parents. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot is sort of the 7 C's. And it's that competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. And I am happy to send these slides to you. I said to one of the moms earlier, I don't write a lot on my slides, but I'm happy to send some of these out to you all if you need it. But looking at competence, we want to help our children build competence. So it's supporting, but not solving, letting our kids gain skills along the way. The confidence is the difference between predicting and preventing and praising the effort, again, not the results. So we may know and we may believe we know what's going to happen, but our children might surprise us. And sometimes, I don't know about all of you, but sometimes as a parent, like I'm anxious over something that my kids are doing, and I exude that anxiousness onto them if I think that maybe they're not going to get the hit that they need. And sometimes we get in our own way as parents because we're nervous for our children. Putting that connection out and recognizing that we as parents, caregivers, teachers, and providers can really be, I look at it like a lighthouse. Like we have to assure our children that there is access in the larger world, within our neighbors, within our school, and turning off sort of the parent alarm and remembering that our children might hide some of the disappointment if they think they're going to disappoint us. And we want them to see the world for a larger place and know that one disappointment doesn't shift the mark. It simply builds an opportunity to say, okay, it didn't go the way we wanted it to go. So let's talk about what we need to do next time. Building character, I said it at the beginning in my whole Facebook analogy, really moving away from sort of idolizing the celebrity and the hero and really talking to our children about character. That's a conversation that doesn't happen as much anymore because we are so used to text messaging and social media and everything is on screens, but really helping children realize that character is about what you're doing when no one is looking and leaning into celebrating acts of kindness that you might see your children participating in. The contribution, helping our children find a sense of purpose. And maybe that is a purpose that's different than yours. Or maybe it's a purpose that you share together. But knowing that in being involved in service, interacting and being a part of something that is bigger than ourselves helps to build life skills that our children can take with us. And it doesn't mean that you have to travel to a foreign country and do a mission trip for 10 days. It might be something as simple as buying 5 greeting cards and having your child fill them out and dropping them off at the local nursing home. Or maybe it is simply just going next door and checking on a neighbor who is not out and about and just saying, we're just checking in on you. So making strides with your child for them to sometimes see beyond what is right in front of them. And the coping piece, when we and our kids are stressed, helping kids find ways to deal with disappointment or stressful situations with healthy strategies. So maybe it's helping our children learn about a pause. So I use that in my office all the time. When things are stressful, running a mental health agency and a rape crisis center, I'm sure you all can imagine that we have some stressful days from time to time. And sometimes it's just the reminder of, let's just pause for a second. Let's just take a pause and give ourselves a couple of minutes to just sit. Or maybe it is using a breathing exercise, taking a couple of breaths in and letting a couple of breaths out. One of the things that I work with our area schools on test anxiety, and one of my little nuggets that I say to the kids when we're preparing for these big state tests is, if you are feeling stressed, scientifically it is proven that if you take a moment to reach down on the floor and grab your bottle of water, unscrew your bottle of water and take 2 sips, put your top back on and put the bottle of water back on the floor, your brain has no choice but to disengage from stress for that time. And it's a reset that nobody knows about. It's not like you have to sit there and say, I'm really stressed and I need to leave the room. It's a simple drink of water. We all do it, but it's a really great strategy for kids who might be feeling stressed. So coming up with ways that maybe are really noticeable, or maybe your kids can do just simply by picking up a bottle of water and taking a sip if they are stressed. And then control, and remembering that our kids, we are internal animals. We want to be in control. And so giving them the control, but monitoring it with structure. Because the reality is our kids crave structure, they crave boundaries. And so if we can say to them, yes, you absolutely can take the lead on this with these 3 things in place, it gives our children the ability to feel like they're managing something, but we as parents can then say, here's your parameters, here's where you need to stay. I think all of this is wonderful information. It's great, great things that you all can try, little nuggets here and there, but we can't do any of this as caregivers, as parents, if we can't take care of ourselves. And so probably the most important information that I believe comes out of work like this are the next 2 slides. Number 1 is that we don't have to be everything to everyone. And I don't know about you, but I live in a world where when things are moving fast and people need things, as a mom, I feel like I've got to do it all. And I've got to be here and I've got to be there. And this kid's got to get here and the work needs this. And one of the things I say to parents all the time is, it is fine if you say no, and it is okay to say, I'm not sure, let me get back to you. Because part of taking care of our children is modeling the behavior that we don't have to be the superhero. We've all taken on so much, and at some point the boat begins to tip. So if you feel like you're compromising your own well-being while taking care of everybody else, I encourage you to take a step back and simply say, I'm not sure, let me think on that. No 2 people are going through this experience in the same way. And so I think through the pandemic, we heard a lot of people say, oh my gosh, we're all experiencing COVID. Well, that may be true, but we were all experiencing it very different. And so while we can say we are all in this together as parents, know that we're not all experiencing it the same. And so part of what we have a responsibility to do for our children is to help them understand that all kids are not experiencing things the same either. So there may be two children who both share a diagnosis of ADHD, and it might show up very different for those two kids. And so helping to be able to say to our children, you know, we're not really sure what's happening, but let's be supportive rather than judgmental. I've said it throughout the presentation already. It's okay to get it wrong. I love getting it wrong because that means that I've given it a go, but we tend to fall into a world as parents from time to time where we need to get it right all the time. And when we don't, we're pretty hard on ourselves. And so just trying new ways until we find what works is really important. And the mindfulness allowing us to be in the here and now, learning how to focus in the here and now. Even the fact that you all have taken time this evening out of busy schedules and busy lives to be here means that you're further along than some parents may be. And you might not be as far along as other parents, but you're in it. And the mindfulness to know that this is important. And if you can take even one moment from this presentation tonight on with you, you've lived in your here and now moment. And it's helping our children also to be mindful of how calm space and in the moment presence can really help to reset a day. My favorite one of all of these is that even grown-ups need to be put in timeout sometimes. My children and I established this really well as I was a full-time CEO and a full-time homeschool parenting during COVID. And so our big thing is, I say to my children all the time, I have never regretted a time that I took a timeout, but I can't say the same if I haven't. So there may be moments where I needed a timeout and I didn't take it. And I regretted how I handled the situation or my response to my child. And so timeout is okay. And it is really okay for us to be our best selves with our children by saying, I need a minute. It doesn't mean I love you any less. It doesn't mean that I am not going to be here to support you. But right now, mommy is not showing up as her best self, and I need some time for me. My kids give the ability, you know, we have situations where I will say, you need a timeout. And my son will say, Mom, I think it's time for you to take a timeout. And so we've created a really safe dialogue. And that goes back to those vulnerable conversations where we can say to our kids, you know what, sometimes mommy needs a timeout too. Sometimes it's okay just to say this stinks. We live in a world where, I don't know about you, but I feel like continually people say, oh my gosh, well, at least it's not this bad, or at least you don't have this diagnosis with the neighbor down the street. And we sometimes feel like our situation is never bad enough, or maybe we feel like our situation isn't bad enough. And the reality is, in our own world, whatever's happening, it's okay to just live in the moment of, this sucks. Like this is not a good situation. And we don't have to qualify or quantify any of that for anyone. It's just being able to say, in this moment as adults, you're right, it stinks. And sometimes when you're sharing with people what's going on, that's really all we need to hear. So Brene Brown always says that when we are talking about empathy, empathy is really important for us as caregivers. And empathy never starts with, well, at least. It usually starts with, I'm so sorry, but I'm so glad you shared. And so helping our children understand that sharing empathy with their friends and with their classmates is an important thing. So we don't feel like we have to one-up one another in situations where we might be struggling. Asking for help. This is so huge. It is okay to ask for help. Oh, I skipped remember to find some time for you. Finding those moments, whether it's a cup of tea in the morning, whether it's a cup of coffee, maybe it is 5 minutes in the hallway as you're in the middle of a million things and just saying, I'm just going to go sit for a minute. It might be taking a walk in the morning, journaling, maybe it's reading scripture, maybe it is listening to a podcast, but I am someone who believes. I lived in Japan for a while after college. And what I learned in living in Japan is that the culture that I was a part of, we worked really hard through the week and we played really hard on the weekends. And I say to my staff all the time, If we save our self-care for the weekend, then we're not doing self-care right. Self-care is something that we have to practice daily. And you might be someone who says, okay, Beth Anne said last night, I need to practice self-care. I need to take 5 minutes for myself. And maybe you'll do it for 4 days really well, and then you'll fall off. That's fine. Jump back on. This is not a New Year's resolution. This is about self-care. And so sometimes we have to start and restop, and that's okay. Asking people for help, super important. I'm the worst at it. I will tell you right now, I don't ask for help well, but I can tell you that when I do, it makes a world of difference. And so being able to sort of see how can you use the community and the circle around you, and leading with grace and understanding. There's a huge amount of research that goes into understanding and non-judgment. I do a lot of work across the state with ACEs, our adverse childhood experiences. And one of the things that we know from our research is that looking at our community with a lens of not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. You know, think about the parent that you see who's having a really difficult time with their child, and maybe they're yelling at their child at the grocery store, and you think, oh my gosh, what is wrong with that person? And imagine what that conversation would look like in your mind if you said, wow, I wonder what happened today that's making this moment so tough. And so if we can, as parents, help our children by leading with grace and understanding that maybe something has triggered the response that you're getting that has nothing to do with you. Maybe it's that something bad happened in school and they haven't shared it with you. And so all of these moments, if we can be modeling and sharing examples with our children, help our children build the skills to be able to then pay it forward. There is no magic answer. There is no magic formula, but what we know is that when we practice good skills, when we take care of ourselves as parents, our own mental wellness begins to thrive, and then be more present for the children who may be needing a little extra. And here's the thing in all of it, it isn't always easy, right? I mean, there's going to be days where we're exhausted as parents, and the last thing that we want to do is sit down and have this kumbaya conversation to figure out what's happening. So I get it. Sometimes it's going to be tough. But what we know is that if we can employ some of these strategies and take a pause and take a moment where we say, seem to be really struggling, and I'd like to have an understanding of what's going on. So help me understand what the reaction's about tonight versus just go to your room, I can't handle it. We can find moments where we begin to build those moments of trust, because trust happens in small moments for our children, and connection happens when trust is present. And so building those moments of connection and trust is what continues to help us as we're making that path for our child, not putting out the journey in front of them, but putting the skills into our child for the journey that's ahead. That is all I have for you all tonight, but I did want to leave some time for questions and answers. So please let me know if feel free just to unmute if there's anything that you have questions about or topics that I didn't cover that you're interested in. I am happy to answer any questions.
I had a question, Beth Anne. There was one of your slides, you were sharing different positive approaches to parenting. One was something along the lines of like positive affirmation or praise. And you had a bullet point that said time out and ignoring. But I don't think you talked about that. I was wondering if you could just share your thoughts there.
Oh, absolutely. And I apologize that I skipped it. So helping our children understanding that pausing is a strategy. So when I put myself in timeout, it may be that I need a moment, but it's really important to have a conversation with our children to help them understand that you're going to take a timeout, that you're not ignoring the problem, that you're not saying to your kid, you're not important. It's just the simplicity of saying, I just need time out, or I just need a couple of minutes to be at my best so that we can continue this conversation. And so the communication and the vulnerability to say to your child, I need a minute, is really important. And that they then understand that whatever has happened and is causing you to need that timeout is not going to directly impact how much they are loved, how much you're willing to sit and have that conversation.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't know if you can even hear me. Can you hear
Yep.
me?
Yep, we can.
Okay. I don't see my pictures. I wasn't sure. You know, I got here late. I'm so sad.
It's okay.
But maybe you could do a little bit of a recap. How about that? Can you do a summary of your
it's
entire
recording
1 hour?
Patricia, this presentation is recorded, so I'm happy to email you a link.
Sure.
You send your email in the chat.
Thank you for being here, even if you're late, and I show up late to a million things. So I appreciate that you even made the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Are you a administrator at the school or a parent?
Oh, so I am the president and CEO of For All Seasons. I run the region's Behavioral Health and Rape Crisis Center. And so we spend a lot of time working with Y River, but I don't work for Y River. But I will say, for all of you that are at Y River, you all have just acquired an amazing music teacher in Amy Morgan, who just started working there. She's a dear friend of mine and played.
Oh.
So if your children are going to go to Y River or they're currently there, you have a wonderful music teacher that has just joined your team.
Mm-hmm. So you work at a counseling, you're doing a counseling center, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If nobody else has a question, I guess I'm wondering, since we have parents of teenagers that have just started to leave the house or will be leaving the house soon, do you have any specific advice for like keeping a connection strong once your kids, you know, like physically leave the house are more independent, which is what we all want, but you know.
Yeah, sure. You know, when I worked in higher education for 15 years, and we would talk with parents all the time about when the parent moved from the driver's seat to the back seat. And I think that's a really important analogy. So I think it's important as our children transition into their next phase of life after high school, is to remember that it's okay that they're in charge of the radio, and it's okay that they are in charge of maybe where the car is driving, but you're still in the car. And so being able to have clear and kind conversations with our children about expectations and creating a space where your children are hearing from you, not just because there's something wrong, but just because you're simply checking in. I have a dear friend who has 2 kids who went off to college last year, and he hears from his son about once every 2 weeks, and he hears from his daughter about 3 times a day. And so, you know, really trying to figure out what your child needs and being okay that your child might not need to talk to you every day. And if you are someone who is used to that, it may be ways of finding a different level of connection. So maybe it's sending a card, or maybe it is checking, you know, sending an email versus picking up the phone, and leaning into when connection is good versus focusing in on frustration if something isn't going the way that you as a parent would hope it would be, knowing that the connection can still be there. I think during transition times, we as parents, myself included, sometimes tend to get stuck in what's not going right instead of celebrating what is. And our children will let us know what they need. And sometimes we then have to say, like, hey, I know that you're really busy and I know you don't need to talk, but I just need you to respond to a text if I'm checking in on you, and being able to have those dialogue and conversations. One of the things that I think is most difficult when transition happens is that first break when children come home from college. And so really being able to have a conversation about what that time is going to look like. You know, kids are pretty independent when they're on college campuses, and then coming home to a curfew, or maybe mom and dad are expecting that they're home every night and they want to go out and see friends. And so having a dialogue prior to your child coming home for that first holiday break is going to be really important. So expectations are out on the table and everybody understands what's expected, makes them for a much easier transition when kids are coming home from school.
True. Yeah. I have a freshman in college, and I know I did the same thing to my parents. Hi, nice to see you. I'm going out with my friends. And it was just like, what?
Yeah. Right.
No, that's not what I drove 3 hours to go get you and for, but
you know, I am a firm believer that sometimes the situations with our children can be exacerbated because we simply haven't communicated expectations. Or we have something in our mind where we're imagining what it's going to look like. And in some ways we set ourselves up to be disappointed, and we set our kids up to fail because we haven't sat down and said, hey, let's talk about what this is going to look like. You know, whether it's going on a vacation, whether it is a weekend where homework needs to get done. If we can sort of say on a Friday afternoon, like, let's just check in, like, what's happening this weekend? What's important to you? What's important to me? Here's where we need to be as a family. What do you need to get your stuff done? Those are the moments that I think we can save ourselves a lot of grief and strife if we can set the stage for kids and ourselves ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions? I did write down the 2 email addresses that were shared, so I'm happy to send those links tomorrow. If anyone else wants a copy, I'll also put it in the meetup group. So you should be able to find it there as well. Okay, well, Beth Anne, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And please, we'll have to get you and Stephanie on the phone together to figure out a time when you can come back to school.
I will come back. And Laura, I did not get a chance to say hi, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please keep in touch. Please come back on December 1st. Beth Anne, if you're not busy with 1,000 other things on the evening of December 1st, we have 2 really interesting speakers. A mother who raised a transgender female, and Sage, her daughter. So they're going to share their experience with us and with our students who will be able to relate to that pretty well.
I'm just
reading the
reading
name of that documentary again.
Yeah. So
it's called Growing Up.
Grown Up.
Yes,
Growing Up.
And Sage was one of the episodes.
Is it? You said it was on? Is it on Disney Plus? You said, or
it is?
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Beth, I wanted to say you gave me a lot to think about. Like, I can't even think about my questions, so that's why I asked for a copy of the slideshow. So.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, I appreciate that. Laura, I saw that you had sent a message that you had a question. Did we get to your question?
I'm not seeing if she had a question. Laura, do you have any questions? Okay, I can check in with Laura via email too, and if she does, I'm happy. I will forward that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time this evening, and I hope that you've taken even a little bit of a nugget with you for how we can be living and working as parents together in this thing called a journey.
Yes.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Night.